All right, Aaron, I am super stoked to have this convo with you. Like I was just telling you, I've actually looked up to you for quite a while online. I'm a tradesman myself, a lineman, and like yourself, love storytelling and always had a passion for photography and videography as well. It's kind of like a side passion of mine. So I was always the guy packing a camera around. And you're somebody I saw in the industry who really showed off the dirt world in a beautiful way, like cinematically. It was crispy and awesome. So yeah, thanks for making the time to do this.
Well, thanks for so much credit. I don't know if I deserve it all,
Oh,
but
dude, come on now.
I'm happy you've been following along.
Yeah. Yeah. What's, give me something that I need to know about your past that makes me understand like who you are today.
I usually start off saying I wasn't from the blue collar world because I think that's a unique part of my story and a unique part of attracting the next generation in a way. I think the industry, the trades in general, has been built largely upon multi-generational relationships, father to son, to then the next generation, oh, my uncle, oh, my grandfather, whatever it was. But I was just one of those kids that grew up in a neighborhood away from anything hardworking. My dad was a tax lawyer, but I, like a lot of kids, had a love for bulldozers that never went away throughout my educational career, fortunately. And I fell into construction at 18 by cold calling a construction company working in my neighborhood, and that was it. I saw a lot of other flashy careers like real estate and law and medicine and whatever it is growing up, but once I fell into construction, I just thought this is it, man. And I've been running with it since. Now about 10 years been involved in the construction industry.
I always ask the linemen I have on the show, like, what was it? What was the turning point? Like, where did they find line work and what made them make the decision to go into it? So, what made you choose the dirt world? Like, just a pure love for bulldozers and excavators and dirt, or like, what made you choose?
Yeah, it was I was just drawn to heavy equipment. I've been drawn to heavy equipment, moving dirt since a little kid, which isn't all that uncommon.
Yeah.
I think a lot of young that love heavy equipment love earth moving. And when this project started to go off in my neighborhood, they had a big excavator and a loader and all kinds of these big machines working right in front of people's houses, right on the street. And I never really seen it that close before. And so I'd go there. I was a senior in high school, which was perfect timing because I was at the point in life where you're thinking, what do I do with my life? I didn't have parents telling me you're going to go do X, Y, Z. I didn't have teachers saying you're going to go do X, Y. I had nothing, and so it was a blank canvas. And I'd go there, I'd watch the work, and I called the company because I wanted to meet the owner and talk to him about the business and how I could get involved in the business. And that's when I asked for a job, and he initially said no because I was 17 at the time. So I called him back when I was 18, and I started out as a laborer. And that summer it was miserable. Phoenix, Arizona, in the summer, it's as
Yeah.
harsh as it. The people that say it's a dry heat haven't worked in
It gets
a
wet
summer.
really fast. Yeah.
It's rough, especially in the trench. And as miserable as it was, I loved everything about it because I was working hard. I could see the work that I put in every day. We were laying pipe, and it's not unlike power lines. You start here and you end here, and
Yeah.
you can look out over the trench and say, "Man, I didn't just work hard. I did that," which is awesome. And I was working around big equipment, and I was working with these Hispanic guys that just took me in and made me part of the family and taught me all the bad words in Spanish. And it was fantastic. And so I, from that summer on, just decided this is it. I don't need to look anywhere else. I'm going to chase this as far as I can.
What made you choose to convert? Like, you obviously have some entrepreneurism in yourself as well. I've watched enough of your podcasts and vlogs and seen what you're doing. Like, where did that come from? At what point in time did you think like, hey, I like business as well, and then make that switch?
The school I went to growing up was called Phoenix Country Day School, and it was for most everybody was very wealthy, and so everybody's friends, all of my friends' dads were somebody, and a lot of them were businessmen, and a lot of them would also have businessmen friends, and so you'd be hanging out. I'd be hanging out at my friends' houses growing up, and you'd be surrounded by all these people that a lot of them were quote unquote self-made, grew up with nothing, and built these empires over 50 years or whatever it was. And then because they'd built these empires, they had all this involvement with all these other people that had built empires. And so growing up, I was just naturally exposed to these people, and I had zero appreciation for it at the time, because as a kid you just think that's how life works, that's your reality, that must be everybody's reality. But as I became older, I realized, wow, I didn't necessarily pick up how to do business. I've had to figure that one out as an adult, but I picked up the traits of highly successful people. I got to see that they didn't sleep in. I got to see that they didn't talk bad to other people or talk bad about other people. I got to see that that didn't drink alcohol to excess. I got to see all of these different characters. They worked hard. They worked on Saturday. They worked on Sunday. I got to see all this stuff, and I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go start a business. In what, I had no idea, but I was so naive. I just thought that's what you did because that was the world I grew up in. Everybody had a business, everybody did something along those lines, and so that's what you do. You figure out what you like and you go make a business out of it.
At what point did you attribute those qualities to success? And like noticing like, hey, they don't drink to excess, they don't sleep in, like all of these things, and go, hey, maybe that's what makes a successful person.
I think I started to really appreciate those things when I was in college. I think as I started to become an adult, and my dad, he did really well, and my parents really took care of me growing up. But when I turned 18, the deal was, cool, we've raised you, we've shown you what's possible, you're on your own now.
Gotcha.
And so that was really sobering, because it was, whoa, I've seen what's possible my whole life, but now it's 100% on me to make that happen, because there's no credit card, there's no checkbook, there's no inheritance, there's nothing. It's figure it out. You've got the skills, go and do it. And so that was, I think, the cold water on my face that I needed. And as I started to dig into, all right, what do I need to do to get that? I quickly went back to, okay, so what have all the successful people I've been around done? They read, they write, they communicate, they exercise, they do all these things. So I'm gonna start doing those things too.
Heck yeah! I recently, I battle with comments, like I'm sure you do online as well, right? Trolls will be trolls, and whoever, I got these comments recently like, hey, the show's a little fluffy. Like these subjects are fluffy, because I talk about a lot of those things that you just referenced, right? And yeah. I talk about them because I've lived them as well. I'm 43. I lived through that portion. Like I lived through my 20s and I didn't do a lot of those things. And I really wish I did, because I'd have an even bigger leg up than I do. Like if I did those things, like self-educate, read more, don't sleep in, work out, like all of those things for self-development, I guess. I get these questions all the time, as I'm sure you do, from the young kids. Hey, I want to get into the trade. How do I get better? How do I do this? What's your advice? Is there anything outside of what you just said? Or like, what do you tell these guys? Because I get these questions constantly, and it's probably the exact same, whether it's lineman or the dirt world portion of it.
I am not as familiar with the world of linemen and the world of power.
It's just blue collar. It's exact
same. It is blue collar, but it is a completely different category, like oil and gas. Sure. It's just a different category, different kind of person. I live in the heavy civil construction world, the building roads, pipelines, bridges, airports, moving dirt, that kind of thing. And so what I tell people from that perspective is one, the opportunity has never been better right now, because the United States only needs more infrastructure. We have a greater infrastructure demand than ever before, and we have older infrastructure than ever before. And so we need to build new and replace right now. And you've got half of the industry retiring over the current decade, which, if you're a business owner, is absolutely terrifying. But to a young individual, that is an enormous opportunity. That's your ability to move faster than ever before. And yeah, you still have to be patient. It's still going to take time, but that opens a whole lot of doors for you. And so companies right now desperately need people that will just do the simple things, like show up every day on time, work hard, like the simplest stuff. And so the opportunities are endless. Show me an industry or a sector with the same opportunities that the trades have right now. It doesn't exist. The opportunities are there. I think what the next generation is looking for is there. It's meaningful work. You're working hard alongside other people. You're doing cool stuff. You can point exactly at what you've been working hard on, say, I did that. And it's not just this stupid thing or spreadsheet. It's something that's supporting your entire country, community, family, whatever it is. And so it has the key ingredients I think the next generation's looking for. To find that, though, is the hard part, because a lot of companies desperately need this next generation, and this next generation's looking around, well, I can't find anybody willing to give me a shot because I have no experience. So it's like, well, wait, which is it? How do we connect those dots? And the best advice I can give them is start looking for companies in your area. Go talk to somebody. If you know a lineman, if you know someone in the construction industry, that's probably the first place I'd start. How did you get in? Hey, do you know anybody that I could talk to? You've got to find your way in. You've got to work for it, and you've got to look for it. And I wish I could just point everybody to one website and say, here's your website, and you apply here like college, and it'll be as simple as that. But it's not. That said, it's worth digging into and looking for those opportunities. Everybody needs hardworking, consistent individuals. It's just a matter of finding the opportunities. And if you go find that opportunity, I guarantee you they're not going to turn you away and say, no, we don't want somebody that's going to show up on time and work hard. Even if you have no experience, that they need people so bad that you'll have your pick.
Yeah. Love that advice.
I don't know if that wasn't very well organized.
100%. No, it's beautiful. It's 100% relatable to the line trade. 100%. I've been telling them as well, like, if you're from 20 to 29, like, you don't know anything. You have no knowledge. You have no skills. You have no money. Don't focus on any of that stuff. Save what you can, earn what you can, but find people that you can learn from. And especially if you like the blue collar world, find somebody you can apprentice with. Find somebody that you can just like suck all the knowledge out of and just gain knowledge. Learn for your 20s, because that'll set up the rest of your life. Because you'll have a network, you'll have skills. Like, those are the things.
Well, you can use your ignorance and lack of experience to your advantage, because you're not a threat to anybody at that point. Yeah. And so the amount of the amount of high quality individuals I've been able to talk to and learn from in my 20s is absurd. Yeah. If I were in my 30s or 40s, not a chance I would be invited into a lot of these rooms, because I'm just, for whatever reason, perceived as a bigger threat. Yeah. But if you are just a stupid kid looking to learn and you're genuinely curious, people are going to invest in you. And so your 20s is the time to find those people and pull that information out of it. And a lot of young people will say, well, I'm just working with this grumpy old guy who won't say a thing, who won't teach me anything. Okay, cool. Just watch them then. Yeah. Just watch. Yeah. And honestly, if you're genuinely curious, if you watch, if you work alongside these individuals, if you build a relationship, if they start to trust you because you're showing up every day, you're working hard, you're making their life easier, there's so few chances they're not going to invest in you. Yeah. But even if they don't invest in you, even if they don't answer your questions, just watch, because they do things for a reason.
It's a good point. That's how I learned how to climb poles. was that grumpy old guy wouldn't take the time to really show you how to do everything. So I'd watch from the ground. I'd watch how he maneuvered his feet, how he pulled his hooks out of the pole, like how he moved around the pole, how he would position his body to reach for different things that me being a short guy couldn't reach. Like I learned everything by watching. So that's a great point. Why BuildWitt? What's it all about? What's your mission?
Well, my plan, to go back to the original story, was to be a business owner. I loved construction. And so, 1 + 1 = 2, I was going to be a construction business owner, because if I was a construction business owner, I would get my name on heavy equipment, which means I would be able to run those machines anytime I wanted, which is not at all how it actually works. But that was the logic in my head at the time, that 18-year-old logic. It's perfect. And so I was going to go work in the construction industry, get some experience, save up, maybe finance a skid backhoe, and become a business owner, because how hard can it be? And so I asked the first guy I worked for, Rich Pearson, for career advice. What should I do from a work standpoint? And what should I do from a school standpoint? Because at that point, the world I grew up in, for better or for worse, you just went from high school to college. It was like going from 9th grade to 10th grade. There was no debating it. It was just the natural thing you did. And so I was going to college, didn't know for what. And he said, go to school for engineering. So I signed up for engineering school. I struggled my way through it, but somehow I passed all my classes for 4 years, barely. And while I was doing that, he also said, go work for as many companies as you can. The benefit of being in college is you're a college kid. There aren't real risks involved, and you can jump around a bunch without people really thinking twice about it. And so I worked for 5 different heavy construction companies while I was in college, doing anything from laying pipe to building railroad bridges to blasting rock. It was awesome. Yeah. I got so much experience so fast, and truly took advantage of the 4 years I had. And so I went into road building after school in Texas, and said, I'm going to do this for a few years and then see where it takes me. And as I did that, though, I was listening to these podcasts by Andy Frisella, MF CEO Project at the time, and he was talking about the value of personal brand and social media. And he made the argument that was, those that have personal brands are going to be more valuable into the future. And so I thought, that's quite brilliant. I want to have a personal brand. What could my brand be? Well, why don't I make it around construction? I don't know everything. I don't know anything really, but I've had these experiences in the construction industry. I have these pictures on my phone like anybody else did or does. Why don't I start sharing some? And so I started sharing some under the BuildWitt name. And this was 7 years ago, a little over now. At the time, there wasn't a lot of anything media-wise regarding the construction industry or the trades on social media. And so I wasn't very good at it, but I didn't have to be very good at it because there wasn't a lot. And so if you're competing amongst yourself, you're good to go. And that storytelling I was doing every day just started to really take off. And so I ended up wrapping up my short-lived professional career 8 months after graduating college, and went all in on BuildWitt. And the initial business plan was, hey, I have a camera. I like taking pictures of machines. I'm going to go try to find some companies willing to have me out on their job sites. I'm going to take pictures of their job sites, and I'm going to try to sell them these pictures. And so that's where it began. And now today it looks a whole lot different.
What has it morphed into today?
Today, it's all
what's
about
the mission.
Well, the short of it is, our entire society is built upon the dirt world, and we made up the term dirt world to describe not just earth moving, but pipelines, roads, bridges, power, critical infrastructure, and natural resources. And you have the entire dirt world built upon human beings, but you've got half of those human beings leaving while demand is potentially increasing. Huge problem. Yeah. And so to overcome that problem, which I think is possible, we have to bring new people into the industry. We have to train them up, and we need to keep them here. And so we're building a business to do those things. But to attract them, we're telling a lot of stories on social media right now. We have our creative business doing that for companies, train them up. We've developed a video-based training platform with over 1,500 videos now on anything from basic safety to equipment operation to how to eat a little bit better in a blue collar setting. And then leadership, how you keep people. That's when you've got to grow yourself as a leader. You got to communicate more effectively. And so we've established an annual event called the Ariat Dirt World Summit, focused exclusively on leadership. And so that's the event. That's the business in a nutshell. It doesn't really make sense because it's a bunch of different stuff, but all the stuff is dedicated to getting this next generation into the trades, elevating them, and then elevating that existing generation to be the leaders we need.
I get it, dude. That's so cool. I originally started this podcast on my own in 2019 from a nook in my townhouse. I was recently separated, just had, those weekends where I didn't have my kids, nothing to do. And I wanted to connect with the linemen again because I'd been in management for a little while. I wanted to connect with the linemen again, but the primary reason I started it was I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to tell our stories. I grew up, my father was a lineman. I'm second generation lineman. I grew up around linemen in the house, sitting around all hours of the evening, telling stories about the cool places they worked, the amazing jobs they did, the people they met. And when I started to do that, I was like, hell, I got these stories of my own now and I want to share them because they're freaking cool. And so I've constantly pushed storytelling in some way, shape, or form, whether it was with a camera or with my voice. So that's the reason I started the pod. And one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you about it, because you seem very similar and you're passionate about storytelling. I've watched a couple of your videos on social media and why personal brand is so important. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about that, because as I've gone through, like I've been with Quanta Services, different companies in Quanta Services for 15 years almost now, and trying to convince companies that they need some sort of, like, especially like construction companies, they live in a different world where they think they don't need to be on social media, or they don't need a brand, or they're not selling a physical product. They're not selling a can of Red Bull or Nike shoes or something. So it's like, what are some tactics you're using to convince these people that they need to be on social? Because I've been fighting this battle for like 15 years as well. And they're finally, taking notice and doing things like this. But like, what do you do? How do you talk to them?
Yeah, it seems like you're doing all right on that front. I I spent the first few years of business trying to convince everybody of that exact thing. And then a few years ago, I stopped trying to convince, and it's worked out a lot better. It's gone a lot better since then. And what I mean by that is, we realized instead of just banging our heads into the wall with people that are just not going to come along, we've further invested with those that do understand it. And so we've gone all in on the early adopters and use the early adopters as an example, because a construction company, I'm 29 years old with a few years of relevant construction experience. And yeah, have I been to probably more heavy construction operations and mining operations around the world than just about anybody over the past years? Yes, but I still don't know a single thing. And I don't have any relevant experience. I don't have a lot to offer them. So why would they listen to me? I don't blame them at all, but they're going to listen to their peer that they really respect. And so I'm going to go work with their peer. I'm going to go make their peer look really good and help them with their brand and help them articulate why go work for them and help show that is part of the solution. It's not the magic potion. It's not the end all be all, but it's certainly part of it. And I'm going to help them attract that next generation and build that culture and train that next generation and ultimately make more money and build better infrastructure and have a better lives for everybody at that company. And then the other companies, everybody's so competitive, they're all going to be watching, and they're eventually going to come along. And so I basically put the industry into, and this is speaking very simply, but 3 categories. We've got the winners saying, all right, cool. Maybe we've been doing this for 50 years and we've been doing it really, really well. But the world is changing and has changed. So despite our success, what do we need to do differently to make sure that we can compete into the future and make sure our number one asset, everybody says it, number one asset, our workforce, is good to go future state? And that might mean we have to do some things different. And that might mean we have to change the way we've always done it, or whatever it is, the status quo. But that's okay. That's not bad. It's just different, and that's okay. And then we've got, I think, the majority, the followers, that will watch those early adopters go win, go claim a massive advantage as a result, and finally say, all right, okay, that's actually a pretty good idea. We're going to go in that direction too. And they might not even be happy about it, but that's fine. They're eventually going to go along. And then there's the third category, and that's just those that are going to ride the status quo into the dirt. They're going to die on the hill. That is the way we've always done it. And that might not be tomorrow, next week, next year, 5 years, 10 years, but it will be at some point. And so we're trying to build a business focused on that first category. And if we focus on that first category, we think we'll be able to help shift the industry as a whole.
I loved your advice in some of the videos I've watched on social media and branding, and company page versus personal page, and the difference, sort of like company brand, personal brand. Speak to that a little bit, because the reason I say this is, even for Quanta Services, Quanta's made up of 300 companies, and they all run their own. They operate independently, per se, kind of. And so they're listening. They're not just the workers, not just the linemen are listening, but the upper level listen. And I want everybody to hear why it's so important. And then I want them to hear like the difference between the two, and why the two have a difference, and they're important.
Yeah, and one of those companies is Blattner. We've been able to do a bunch with them, so I wanted to shout Blattner out, because I think they're doing a great job
awesome.
at this.
They're actually some of the best.
Yeah. I told them that the other day. I was like, this is one of the best career pages I've ever seen. I think company social media has a place. If I'm going to go work for a company, I'm going to probably go to the website and to social media to try to figure out what it's like to work there. That's where I am. That's where the next generation is. That's where I consume all of my information. And so as I'm digging in on the company, one, website, I'm going to Google that company. I'm going to dig through their website. I'm going to see what it's about. And two, I'm going to go to their social media. But in this day and age, companies can only say so many things. And with a company like Quanta, it's this monster operation. And so you can't highlight everything. You can't say some things that you might want to say, whatever it is, because maybe it represents this part of the company. It doesn't represent that part of the company. And so it by default is quite limited. And what I started to recognize over the past year is, I think in the winning category in the industry, there are some companies that are, if you look at the best known companies in the industry right now, you have the big brands like a Quanta, like a BuildWitt, like a Bechtel, that have been around forever and have that enormous name. But there's this other category of smaller companies. And I started to ask, well, why are they well known? Why are people in California referencing these companies I know out on the East Coast? And it's because they have outspoken leaders online, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on their podcast, on whatever it is. And I started to connect some dots, because me as an individual, I want to know who I'm going to work for. Yeah. And so, yes, the company, the brand, the reputation is valuable, but I want to know who's at the helm. Who am I really going to work for? Because yes, it's this big company or small company, mid-sized company, but every company is just human beings at the end of the day, and people buy people. And so I think the companies with leaders that are putting themselves out there, that are putting themselves sometimes in a vulnerable position, are the companies that are more attractive, because they are articulating why me as a young individual, why I should come to work there. And they're showing who I'm coming to work for. And to me, that's very, very attractive.
100%. Tim Cook has a bigger following than Apple. Period.
Yes, because Apple is this giant conglomerate. And yes, I like the products, but I don't know who Apple is. But Tim Cook, yeah, I can get behind him because he has beliefs and thoughts and opinions and this history, you know, however many years he's lived, 50 or 60 or whatever. And he you know, family. I don't know very much about Tim Cook specifically, but people buy into that because, again, they can relate. And so the leaders, or if you're not a leader, if you're just an individual in the industry, people relate to individuals. And so I think everybody in the industry has a role to play here in telling the industry story. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be on social media. And so one of the talking points that I hear a lot is that the blue collar world, the trades, it has this negative perception. And my argument is, yeah, it is perceived negatively, but I think it's worse than that. I think it's non-existent. Because when I was growing up, the trades were not an option. I think to a lot of people growing up in the United States, they're growing up in suburbia. They don't ever really interact with the trades. It's not on the radar. They don't interact with it day to day. They don't see it in school. It's definitely not in college unless their parents are in it. They're not hearing about it from their parents for sure. And so it just doesn't exist. And so how can we make it exist? Well, we have to first tell the story. And if we have these companies telling these stories, cool. If we have industry leaders telling that story, cool. But we need everybody telling that story. I go to social media because I am an idiot. I'm 29 years old. I reach tens of millions of people every week. No paid advertising with social media. It's wild, the power of it. But even if it's at your dinner table, even if you ask yourself, does my spouse really understand what I do and the role I play in society? Do my kids really understand what I do and the role I play in society? Because oftentimes the answer might be no.
Yeah.
And that alone is a huge opportunity for our industry. Like the amount of people at a Quanta, I don't know how many tens of thousands of people are within an organization like that, but just imagine that's tens of thousands of conversations.
60,000.
60,000 conversations. So that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that could be impacted by those conversations alone. Social media is not even in the picture.
Talk about story and what makes a good story so that these same people that are listening can try to understand how to tell stories and how impactful storytelling is even on social media or, you know, in those conversations that they're having, how they can use storytelling to help promote their brand, what they do, and ultimately just blue collar, dirt world, whatever it is.
Well, something I hear from leaders a lot is, I get what you're saying. I understand the value of it. I agree, but I don't want to go talk about myself. I don't want to just sit on the internet and brag about myself. And I say, well, go to my social media. Count how many pictures of me are on there. How many selfies that I have on. You won't find that many because I do 3 different things, and I've built the whole thing that you see on with me on social media. The millions of people we interact with every week. It's all built upon me either inspiring, educating, or entertaining. It's really, really simple. All I do is add value to those that follow along with me by educating them, by inspiring them, by entertaining them. Educating them is very simple. If I'm a lineman, what I do day to day, climbing a pole, for example, to use your example, it's a no-brainer. Yes, I'm climbing a pole. That's my job. I've done it every day for sometimes decades. I don't have to think about it. I know why I'm doing it. But to me, why are you climbing the pole? I have no idea. Why do you need to climb that pole? Not a clue. Not a clue. So it's obvious to you, but that's an opportunity to educate. Hey, we have to climb poles for X, Y, Z reasons. And it could be an iPhone picture of a pole. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Okay, so that's educate. Just explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it. Very, very simple. Anybody can do that. Entertain. A little bit more complex because it has to be fun. But if you're adding value to people when they're scrolling, you know, how awesome is it to see funny stuff or see cool stuff that you oftentimes probably send to somebody else. That's when it's entertaining, because you want to share it with others. It's pretty easy in this world too to entertain, because we do really cool stuff. When we started this podcast, we were talking about the power project with the Chinook helicopter. It's not that hard to create very entertaining content with a Chinook helicopter. But even it doesn't have to be that sexy. I think a lot of what we do in the blue collar world is very entertaining. We're not dealing with spreadsheets. We're not dealing with legal documents. We're dealing with the physical world. We're dealing with big equipment. We're dealing with critical infrastructure that impacts every single person in society. And so the stuff we have to offer is on its own quite entertaining. And then finally, inspire, which is, I think, the most the hardest one, but the most impactful one. And I say hardest because it requires a degree of vulnerability. But to again go to one of your examples, and I don't know your story, but you were a lineman, and I'm sure there were a lot of days and weeks and maybe even months where you're working away from home, and it's hard, and it's really hard. Talking about that, putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I've been to some dark places, man, and here is what I learned through that, and here's what I did to cope with it. And even if that's not worth anything, just know that we're all in this together, and you're not alone. That's quite inspiring. That's a really inspiring message. And yeah, it requires a degree of vulnerability, but that's something that's gonna reach out to me. And if I'm struggling, whoa, that's what I needed to hear today. And I might not even tell anybody. Everybody around me might not even know I'm struggling with anything. But even if I have, that's the cool thing about the internet. I don't have to admit anything. I can still be inspired by you without even ever knowing you. And so everything I post on social media, it's with an intent of providing value to those consuming the content, because there are so many podcasts out there, so many videos out there, so many posts. And so I better provide maximum value to anybody giving me their time. And I do that by educating, entertaining, inspiring.
Love that. Thanks for that. Because I get, as I'm sure you see these corporate pages, and they're usually full of like Happy Father's Day and Happy 4th of July. And it's like, what day is it today? It's like Happy Groundhog Day, like whatever. Like that's the posts you see on the regular, and they're boring. And they're like, I don't know how to post on social media. I don't know how to do all this stuff. Like you just said right there, pick those 3 things, one of those 3 things, and then go tell somebody's story. Julie, what's your, do you have an inspirational story? What is that? John, yeah, I love that. It's pretty easy.
Yeah,
you start just accumulating the stories. 60,000 people, all with stories, endless stories.
60,000 people. I mean, even from a company, you said 300 companies?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's potentially 300 stories every day, 365 days a year.
Exactly.
Pretty big deal.
Exactly. Love that. What makes a good communicator? And speak to communication a little bit, because this is one of the things in the line world, especially, even in big business. It's just communication seems to be like a word that people throw around, and they're like, we need to get better at communicating. We need to get better at communication. Speak to communication a little bit.
Communication is probably the one thing I've spent the most time on over the past few years, because I'm naturally a terrible communicator. And I am a very introverted individual, very, very introverted individual. But I realized to get to where I want to be in life, to build the business I want to build, to have the impact in the industry I want to have, I better figure out how to communicate effectively, because my future is entirely dependent upon my ability to communicate ideas and to articulate what I'm thinking, my thoughts, and where we ought to go. And so once I realized that communication was a skill, like playing basketball, like, I don't know, running a piece of equipment, playing the piano, once I realized that it's a skill that I can practice and improve upon, I dove headfirst into it, because my future is almost entirely upon my ability to communicate. And if you don't think communication matters in your life, I would just ask, okay, cool. You don't want to be the president of Quanta. All right, cool. But are you in a relationship? Do you have children? Do you work with other people? Do you ever interact with any human being ever? Because if the answer is yes, then you are communicating. And if you're not communicating as effectively as you can and should be communicating, you're leaving a lot on the table. And so no matter where you are at, practicing your ability to communicate is key. And I think that is the number one skill people, if I was an ambitious individual in the trades right now, and if they asked me what's the number one skill based on everything you've seen around the world, what's the number one skill I could work on right now, I would say without a doubt communication. Because like you said, that's what everybody wants, better communication. The communication in the blue collar world sucks. It's bad, but that creates the opportunity. If you can become an effective communicator, if you can become an effective leader, well, nothing is outside of your grasp at that point. The ways that you can practice communication: by listening to great communicators. I listen to a lot of podcasts from really smart people, and I listen to how they break down ideas and what words they use and how they articulate within any kind of conversation. I love that. I watch some documentaries. Like I watched a documentary the other day on the Blue Angels. Talk about a high-performing organization. Yeah, there are a few higher-performing organizations than the Blue Angels. But the whole time, I just watched how these people communicated with one another, because
you have to be very precise.
Like, you have to be so precise. And so how they communicate is amazing. And I was able to learn so much just by watching it from that perspective. Reading is huge, because you are ingesting different words. You're seeing different communication styles. And then writing. I think one of the best things I've done for my communication is I've written every single day for 7-8 years now. And when I got serious about brand and social media, I made a rule: I'm going to post every day. And a lot of people say, well, that's not I don't know what to post about. Yes, because it's a skill. You haven't trained yourself to see those stories happening around you and to articulate those stories. But if you put yourself under that constraint and you make yourself do it, even if you never publish anything, you are learning how to more effectively articulate what's happening around you. And so at least for me, from my perspective, learning how to communicate and articulate what I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling, where we need to go, is without a doubt one of the best things I've ever done.
Love that. I feel that. A similar story. I was the shy kid in school, believe it or not. Like I rarely spoke to anybody. I was super, super, super shy. And I decided one day that if I was going to do stuff like this, or if I was going to be a leader or a foreman, like I need to learn how to talk to people. And so I just like made this decision one day: I'm going to start practicing these things. And like, okay, where do I go to learn these things? Books was huge. Larry King, the godfather of communication and questioning people, or interviews. He's got a book called How to Talk to Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere. Super small book, easy to read, but like the things he brings up in there, just body language and leaning in and voice fluctuation, just these little things that you're just like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But if you practice them and do them, it's like makes the world a difference. And then I started listening to, you bring up podcasts, same thing. I started listening to podcasts, but instead of listening to everything the guest was saying, I started listening to the host and how they were asking questions. I started like stealing questions and writing those questions out. Oh, that's a good question. Like Tim Ferriss said that. He's like, I steal questions all the time. I'll be on an airplane and see a great question in the catalog in the front. And I'm like, write that question down. I'm going to go in the pocket for later. And that's like, those sorts of things have helped me so much. And they're easy to do. They're out there already. You're already doing it. Just listen to it differently. Listen to the podcast a little differently. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, I think podcasts are one of the best things that have happened, especially in the blue collar world, because there's so much windshield time in this industry. I mean, and anybody that spent any kind of time in this world knows that you spend a lot of time in the truck or car. that's an opportunity to grow and learn and better yourself, if nothing else.
It's a couple years there. I spent 50, 60,000 miles in the year, 70,000 miles in a year, just driving. Absolutely freaking brutal. What's our problem in the dirt world right now? Like, the dirt world directly reflects line work as well. I speak to linemen, but to put a pole in the ground, you got to move earth. Like, to get to there, you got to move earth because you got to build roads, right of ways, things. What's our biggest struggle and problem right now that we need to solve or help solve when it comes to the dirt world?
I don't necessarily want to distill it down to one thing, because I think there's plenty of things. But what we've really narrowed in on is leadership and communication. There's a lot of really talented people out there that can climb poles, that can dig holes, that can grade roads, that can fix machines. I'm in a really fortunate position. I get to interact with a lot of tradespeople, and I just sit there like a 6-year-old every time I'm watching them work, because I'm so amazed by what they do and how they do it. I think it is the coolest thing in the world. Yeah. We're good at what we do. We can build power lines, we can build roads, we can do everything we need to do. It's the people equation. If you ask a foreman, a superintendent, project manager, president, whatever you want, what's your biggest challenge? They're probably gonna say people. And so I think we've got a lot of this stuff figured out, but if we can figure out leadership, communication, people, I think if we can be a little bit more caring, if we can ask ourselves, how do we make our people better overall, not just better workers, but better human beings? I think there's a lot of opportunity in those categories. And I think the companies that I see that are doing the best are doing those things. They're not necessarily, they're asking themselves, how do I build a better road? What kind of technology do I need? On and on. But they also know that anybody can go buy those machines, and nothing is really all that proprietary in this world. Yeah. Nothing. You're building based off a set of plans and specifications that's also given to everybody else. So there's not that much room for creativity here. But they all say what can't be replicated is the workforce, are the individuals doing the work. Are we going to be able to automate this work tomorrow or in 5 years, 10 years? I don't see that happening. I think this is always going to be a human-driven industry, which is why I love it, because it's, I think, always going to revolve around hardworking human beings, especially in the power world. There's no Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. That doesn't happen, because you need power delivered to over 300 something million people, 24/7, 365 days a year. And it's no accident. It requires hardworking people that go above and beyond to make that happen. But I think the companies, the leaders, the crews that really ask themselves, how do we lead our people a little bit better? How do we take care of our people a little bit better? How do we grow our people a little bit better? Those are the ones I think are going to win long term, even if that's different. I think something that's happening right now is it's a generational shift, because the older generation right now grew up in the school of hard knocks, right? And they grew up probably around their dad, or in some instances their mom or uncle or grandpa. They grew up around this kind of work when they were like 8 years old. And so by 18 years old, they already had a decade of experience. They absorbed it all just through osmosis, and that's where they started. And so they think that, well, reading a tape measure is just a common sense, because it was common sense to me. But again, you now have we've urbanized as a country. Most everybody's growing up in a city now, far from real world work, for better or for worse. They're not growing up around that. You can't take children to job sites anymore because it's illegal. And so they're coming to these sites at 18 years old, 20 years old, 24 years old, not knowing a single thing. Yeah. And so as somebody in the previous generation, I could say, well, they're just dumb. Or I can say, well, I have all this knowledge. They might have not learned the way I learned. And maybe they're showing up on a job site not knowing how to use a tape measure, but that's because no one's taught them. And so why don't I spend the time to teach them how to use a tape measure? And so I think that previous generation has a responsibility to pass that information down to this next generation. And I think this next generation has a responsibility to work hard, to be consistent, show up every day at the right time, and to be patient as well, and to ask questions and to seek that knowledge. I think it's both sides of the fence here that needs to work together. But I've seen it happen plenty of times over, and everybody's better off for it. The older generation's better off because they're able to do better work. They're less stressed because they have the crew necessary to do the work. And then that incoming generation is learning more, learning faster, able to support that crew more effectively, able to make more money. Life's good. And so call me, naive or overly optimistic or whatever it is. I've seen that happen very successfully a lot of times over now, and we're just trying to help replicate it across the industry.
What gets you excited now? What are you seeing? Is there a sector? Is there something out there that's like, wow, this is cool, that you're telling people, hey, pay attention to this. It's going to be exciting over the next few years.
I think infrastructure in general is exciting over the next few years. The way I have had the opportunity to go around the world now doing this. So I've been in the past 16 months, Australia a few times, Canada. We just did all of Europe. I've been to the Middle East, going back again. I've been to Asia. So I've gotten to see a big cross-section of the world. And I spend a lot of time just digging into what's coming future state, because if I can see the future, I can potentially help get people there, build a business to help cater to it. And there's just no situation that I see less infrastructure required wherever we're going. And we can argue what kind of power sources we need, or what the population is going to look like, or whatever it is. We can argue all these different things. But no matter how you argue different things, more infrastructure is going to be required. And as long as there's human beings on planet Earth, we are going to need infrastructure to meet our basic needs: food, water, and shelter. We need more infrastructure. We need to replace old infrastructure. And so I don't really care if people come into the dirt world or become a lineman or a carpenter or a plumber or whatever it is. It's all in demand. Just come on in and find whatever excites you and work that. And I don't want to be a lineman, but I still want to support the critical power industry. Are you kidding me? You can be an accountant. You can be a lawyer. You can be anything in this world. Just come on into this world, because we desperately need people that want to create things, provide value, and ultimately care for the human race future state. And so I'm just excited about infrastructure in general.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a really great point. Just because we say blue collar doesn't mean that you're all like you're working with dirt or you're blue collar. Like 60,000 employees here, 30,000 of them work in an office building every day. You know, they're everything that you just said: accountants, lawyers, like finance guys, like admin, like we need it all, but you just needed to be in this world.
Correct. And all those people in the office support the people in the field.
100%.
But if the paychecks didn't clear for the people in the field,
totally,
people aren't going to work for free. So we need both. It can be both. It's not one's better than the other.
Totally. Okay, I got one more topic to cover with you. This is a topic I thread through every podcast because it's important to me. It's important in this world. It's a topic of mental health, and I just like to ask, like, what do you do? You're a busy guy. You're on a company. You're all over the world. You're doing this and that. What do you do to support your mental health or help support others' mental health? Because it's important.
I've done a few things over the past few years that have been really, really good for me. I honestly had no issues most of my life. And then something odd happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. And it wasn't even the event itself that was the problem. It was something that just, I don't know what happened, but it triggered all kinds of nonsense. And I had anxiety that was just so bad. And up until that point, I thought anxiety was something, if somebody was anxious, you say, just take a deep breath, just calm down, you'll be okay. And this was the first time I experienced anxiety it was just this physical, this just weight on my chest that I could not get off. And I to get away from it, just wanted to work more, but it was so intense. I couldn't focus on work. So I just could not shake this. And it was weeks and weeks and weeks. And I asked myself, man, I've got to figure this out, because this is not good. And I've got to do something. And so since then, I've been really consistent with a few things. One, exercise is so important. It's so important for me. So I have exercised every single day for many years now, no matter where I am in the world, no matter what my schedule is. And it doesn't have to be a triathlon in the morning. Yeah. It can be a 15-minute walk. Yeah. It's as simple as that. But just movement is so, so, so important. 2, controlling my diet the best I can. And it's really hard when you're on the road. I eat at a lot of gas stations, but instead of the Oreos, I go for the beef jerky. Instead of the soda, I go for a protein shake or a bottle of sparkling water or something like that. I've tried to control my diet, because my body is part of my mental health. And so if I can control those things, that's key. 3, I've tried to control my sleep as best I can. That's a big piece too. And it's hard when you're on the road, when you're working some of these hours, when you're on shift work, you're swinging back and forth, whatever it is, totally understand. But I've tried to control that the best I can. 4, I have been in pretty consistent therapy since that happened 4 or 5 years now. And it's been awesome. It's really, really helped me just work through things. You've got somebody paid to listen to you for an hour. It's amazing. And they're not biased. They're not a family member. Yeah. They don't know anything. They don't know anybody you know. They're just a third party that's there to ask you questions about your life, and it gives you an opportunity to just talk things through. I'm not sitting there crying every time, but it just having somebody ask me, so what's going on? And me just sitting there, well, this happened. And then an hour goes by and I've been able to process a bunch of stuff has been so beneficial. Yeah. And then 5, I've written every day. All I do, I have a notebook, very small notebook. The rule is I write a page every day. That's it. So whatever's on my mind, I put down on that page. And it just gives me a programmed moment in the day to process. And I do all of these things when I'm traveling, no matter where I am in the world. If I've had 3 hours of sleep, I've tried to stay religious, because it's really helped me stay in the lane I should stay in. And then to help others, the biggest thing I've done is just talk about it. Yeah. I've learned that telling you need to go to therapy is very unproductive. You're going to be like, well, who are you? And it's just dumb. It's not going to do anybody a service, even if I'm right, even if you do need to go to therapy. But if I sit here and talk about all the benefits that therapy has afforded me, now you're going to start to think about it. Or if I'm in a leadership position, especially, and I'm vulnerable, I don't look weak. I signal to all of my people that, hey, I've been through some shit, but I've dealt with it, and this is how I've dealt with it, and it gives the people that you lead basically permission to maybe talk about what they have going on, or to feel what they're feeling, because we all feel stuff, and there's no one that doesn't feel stuff, and it's just, I don't know if it's not the perfect formula, but this is a brutal world. And I think the more we can talk, but not just talk, do stuff about it, the better off everybody will be. Because the reality is the suicide rate's out of control. And then even worse, the overdose rate is absolutely brutal right now in construction. So we were number 1 for suicide. I think it was 5 times the average rate. The overdose rate is 12 times. 12 times. Because I go potentially get injured. I go get a prescription for XYZ. My prescription runs out. I go find pills in whatever town I'm working in. One of them is laced with who knows what. Gone. And so the more we can talk about this, I think the better.
100%, dude. I appreciate you sharing all that, because it's like this world is notoriously hard, and this blue collar world is notoriously hard on mental health. Like you mentioned, you're like, I don't know how many days you spent away from home. The number was 300 one year. 300 days I spent on the road away from, my then wife and 2 kids. Like it's stupid. It's stupid, and it's hard. And you're usually like, you're not in a nice place either. Like you're in BF nowhere, staying at a shitty Motel 6, like bed, or you bought some shitty trailer that you're sleeping in at a campground, freezing your ass off. It's hard.
Yeah,
it's
they don't put transmission lines on the beach or through Beverly Hills.
No. Those aren't the ones you ever get on anyway.
Yeah,
those projects are premier. So good. Well, I appreciate your time, buddy. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for making the time for it, and glad it worked out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope you guys got some value out of that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to draw your awareness to a couple of other things. So we make these podcasts, yes, but it's not the only thing that we put out as far as content. Our social medias are full of valuable cuts from the podcast itself, as well as just a bunch of other educational stuff and entertainment. So go follow us at Powerline Podcast on all social media platforms. And then also YouTube. I don't think that a lot of you are aware of this, but we don't just load these podcasts onto YouTube. We also make vlogs, which are super educational, entertaining, great place to direct people to learn about the industry, learn about the trade, or just learn about what's going on within either Quanta or the Powerline industry in general. So hit up our YouTube channel. Again, it's at Powerline Podcast. You can catch those vlogs on there. We also load a bunch of other extra content in video form. We try to up the quality every time we do this. We try to up that quality. So hit up the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subbed to all those platforms. Appreciate you guys. Hope to see you again soon. We'll see you again soon. Peace.